Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar brought to you by Bursa Malaysia and managed by our company LifeChamp. Our webinar title today is Deep Dive into the Technology Value Chain of Malaysia. My name is Shen Chu. I'm the moderator for this session. Now, are you often curious about how the technology value chain works? Now, the global technology value chain could be quite complex, but understanding its ecosystem can provide us with the insights we need for us to make informed investment decisions among the local technology players. So today, we are going to learn about technology value chain in Malaysia. Now, before we begin, as usual, disclaimer, whatever we share in this webinar is only for educational purpose. In no way that we give any recommendation for you to buy or sell any listed securities that we mentioned here. If you decide to make any investment decision, you're solely responsible for all your investment risk. Allow me to briefly introduce our speaker today. Now, he first indulged himself in the SME financing industry right after finishing his diploma in finance and investment in TAR University College. He continues to pursue his interest in the finance and capital market by joining Rakuten Trade and TA Securities, which he held the position of risk and compliance officer and dealer's representative. To date, he has over 8 years of experience in the capital market as an investor himself, where he also runs One to Invest, a financial blog which amassed over 60,000 followers to date. He was also an associate director at a private equity firm and is now a senior partner for a corporate advisory firm. Currently, he's also a SGX Academy speaker. So he's none other than Mr. Max Tan. Okay, Max, good evening. How are you today?
Good evening, Shane, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm doing good.
All right, good to see you. Okay, so I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over the control to you.
Sure, one moment, guys. Okay, I hope you guys can see my screen.
Perfect.
Hey, okay, nice. Once again, good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Shane, for having me today. And I'm very pleased to discuss with everyone here, specifically on the topic on diving deep into technology value chain of Malaysia, where we will be highlighting the importance of technology in Malaysia, some of the key developments over in the technology market, especially over in Malaysia. And we are going to look back, or we're going back to Bursa Malaysia, as how we as investors should look at some of these technology companies, right? And tonight, something extra, if I remember correctly, tonight we're going to see what's Federal Reserve going to do later on. And I think this is quite important for the overall US market and also for the global market, right? And especially for the technology companies. So any hawkish sentiment or any hawkish remarks by the Federal Reserve, it might impact the investor sentiment, or it will impact the level of interest for investor, and of course the technology sector, which is the largest constituent for their indexes now. um, a lot of people has been speculating that the Federal Reserve may or may not push down the rate by 25 basis point. And while this for the short term is something good, but for the longer term, it might also means that the current White House, they have an influence over the Federal Reserve, which might over the long term impact the confidence level of the independency of the US dollar and also the US as a whole, right? But I think that's a completely another rabbit hole for us to dive into. We'll now go into our key topic today. Okay. And as Shane has mentioned just now, I just want to briefly recap and welcome those who just joined in. By no means this session is for you to give you a recommendation on securities, because we probably going to touch off some of the company names on Bursa Malaysia. So we are not going to induce or ask you to buy or sell or hold. So this is a educational and informative session, and hopefully you can get something out of it, right? Okay, blah, blah, blah. And this one is about me, so we skip that. Okay, so as we move into 2025, basically technology in the modern era, to me, I think it's has already transformed into wants. Last time, having Wi-Fi, having an internet access is a want, but now it's probably something that we need. Just imagine a world without internet, without wireless connection. So I think the whole world will get havoc, right? As you can see in those disastrous movies. So it's very, very important, the technology to persist. And in Malaysia itself, it's also very, very critical for us as a backbone for our growth as we move into the data era. I'll talk about the backbone and also the data era shortly, right? And right, many years ago, I think, as some of you may recall, we have really transformed from plantation and then to very traditional kind of industrialization, right? From farming, from using many maybe 80s or 70s, we are using steam engine, right? Coal as the main source of power. Well, for coal, to be frank, we still have a lot of coal-fired plant, but at least we are improving and transforming. It's not the main source of energy that we are using. Then as we move on from using steam engine as coal, we are moving into mechanical base and we see more industrialization has been in place. So with all this technology coming in place, productivity has increased dramatically and then with enhanced connectivity, not only to human, but one important part of the um, connectivity is also machine to machine. We're going to talk about that later on also, right? All this increase in productivity, enhanced connectivity, it leads to what? Leads to a more efficient in mass production of a lot of products. So it saves us human time, right? And then we also accelerated a lot of global trade. And the third wave of the industrial evolution is all about electronic devices, the launching of electronic devices. We have this computer, basic robot and whatnot, and then it further enhances the productivity of human. And then we look back, maybe in 2018, right? We have Industry Forward launched by our government, which is the tailored for Industry 4.0 specifically. And it's really game changing in terms of interconnected intelligence, like what I mentioned just now, connection between man to machine and also machine to machine, right? Basically, Industry 4.0 is the start of a machine communicating with each other. So why is it important? I mentioned just now the production, the productivity, right? Imagine a sensor with very low latency access to internet. So what does that mean is that it wouldn't lag. There will be no spike, lost packet of data, right? They're able to collect and then they're able to react on real time on a lot of things. For example, overheating. So they can track or sense the temperature, right? They can also track your inventory level, which is very common now. A lot of people are using what we call ERP and enterprise resources planning software system, right? And they can also track up to equipment fatigue. Allows a lot of these manufacturers, they can plan for schedule maintenance and also productivity monitoring on each part of their production capacity. And then for us as end user, the benefits is, well, one of it is probably you watching this session right now, or you scrolling on the TikTok, Instagram, or whatnot, right? Now, if we talk about industrialize and also technology, now what stage are we in now? If you are able to look at one of the recent video released by China's Xiaomi, they have a factory show video that has gone quite viral, right? With their maximum capacity reaches one phone manufactured per second. And they're using the concepts of lights out. If you are in the industry, probably you heard of lights out, but it doesn't mean that, oh, I turn off the light to save energy. No, but this is something that has been launched, I think, back in pre-COVID era. Everyone has started to talk about lights out concept, which means the manufacturing facility, they have no manless production facility. And if you look at in Penang, we already have some lights out and partial lights up facilities like Western Digital and some other MNCs, right? So what does that mean is all these machines, they have the robotic, maybe like a robotic guided vehicle that can load and unload, let's say, the wafer, the chips, and then they can go through the testing process. After testing, another guided vehicle will come and collect and put in another tray, right, for completed products. So it's something that we call a completely lights out kind of facility. Of course, there are still maybe a couple of people that are outside the facility monitoring whether there's any emergency happens. For example, the machine is not running as usual, or the productivity level or the yield has dropped. Then the human intervention comes in. They need to investigate what is going on, right? And going forward, I believe everyone knows it's quite obvious that the next thing is going to be AI, artificial intelligence. Now, I'm not a subject matter expert, but I think it's something everyone is looking into. And fundamentally, AI is about data interpretation and also how the system able to learn and process from mass data lake. So I would say that going forward, data is the new uh, gold. You can call it new gold or new oil, especially for those data have been filtered, has been verified, has been proven. Those are very, very important, right? And this is the big picture that we as investor we should look into. What kind of companies they are involved in, maybe like we mentioned just now, the lights out concept. The lights out concept actually reflects automation. What companies are involved in this process? And when we talk about data processing, right? What company they are involved in AI, they're involved in data processing. It's not specifically they are really doing AI, but as I mentioned just now, we look back one step further. The fundamental layer of it is the computing power, right? And when you need computing power, you need GPU and data server. And there are a couple of companies in Malaysia. For example, one EMS company in Malaysia, they got the exclusivity from NVIDIA to assemble some of the data servers, right? And in terms of data server, we also have companies that sell NVIDIA products, and also other companies that are selling these servers. And if we go deeper, let's say we break down the GPU, we break down the data server. Inside there, there's chips. There's what powering all these monsters, right? GPU, data center, advanced HPC, high performance chips. So these are the things that is powering them, the chips. And the chip part, to come up with a chip, later on we will touch on that, the whole value chain of it. It involves a lot of things actually, from a piece of wafer. It involves OSAT, right? We talk about OSAT later on. I explain what is OSAT. It involves the substrate, involve a lot of test equipment. Malaysia is known for high mix test equipment and a lot of consumables we might not see. And it comes into IC design, the design of the chip, wafer manufacturing level, front end, back end. And we're going to talk about where, on which part, the technology players over in Malaysia is able to participate in, right? Just a little bit of statistics and number for those who are uninitiated. In Malaysia, as you can see, the export of E&E products has already surpassed petroleum products for, I think, for many years already. For some of you may think that, oh, Malaysia, we probably, we have a lot of good resources of palm oil, we got good resources of oil and gas, but in fact, E&E is the key export for Malaysia. Over in 2023, as you can see here, we exported 575.46 billion, or 40.3% of our total export in 2023. And looking into 2024, a lot of people talking about, oh, 2024, the whole industry is going to slow down. It's going to be weaker. Yes, on segmental basis, that's true. But on a holistic kind of view, if you look at the export figure, right, we expanded the E&E export numbers to 601.18 billion. And the contribution to overall export is still the same, 39.9%, right? Okay, some more figures to warm up everyone. As you may know, Malaysia, Malaysia, right? Malaysia is the sixth largest exporter or sixth largest player in semiconductor region, specifically with 13% market share in terms of what we call OSAT, which is also considered as a back-end semiconductor, right? And what exactly is this OSAT? We keep talking about OSAT. Well, OSAT is basically very important step for semiconductor. Now, we have front end. Front end is something more atas skit, right? Something more advanced. But the back end is very important. Without the back end, the chip wouldn't come out really. And we start off with the value chain, although the next two slides we're going to talk about the value chain, but let's warm up a bit. We talk about OSAT. We start off with some chip designer. Imagine someone design a chip and Hotcake in town, NVIDIA, they design a piece of chip, right? They are chip designer. Then after they design, they will outsource it to some other, we got foundries, some other players to help them to manufacture the chips after they design. TSMC, basically Intel, they are considered IDM integrated. They design and they also manufacture their own bare chips, right? And we have global foundries. For those who are nerd, right? If you're interested, actually Global Foundries, they spin off from AMD. If you look at your if you are diving in with your laptop or with your desktop, chances are AMD is actually taking up a lot of market share of Intel in terms of CPU. Maybe sometimes they also sell the GPU as well. If you look at them. So Global Foundries, the manufacturer of all these chips, they are spin-off from AMD actually in 2009 to prevent themselves from going bankrupt for AMD last time. Then after TSMC, okay, let's say TSMC, they finish up a chip, they will pass the chip, we call it bare chip at this stage, and they pass to players like OSAT, maybe like Malaysia, we have our Inari, we have our MPI, we have our Unisem. They pass to them to carry out what we call testing and assembly work. So basically, when what I mentioned bare chip, basically the chip is considered unprotected yet because it's still after they print a layer of circuit onto this wafer, you need to put encapsulation, so like something to cover it and to test it, let's say functionality test or whatever test, right? So this layer, it could be epoxy, ceramic, silicon, and some maybe they use glass for advanced packaging technologies, but that one is another today for me, right? And it protects, the function is to protect the bare chip, basically we call it packaging. And the OSAT, these players, they need to manage the yield of this bare chip to complete production also. That means for 100 chips that come in, bare chips that come in, after my packaging and also my testing, how many successful that goes out, right? And we mentioned just now, it might go through functionality tests to test whether this chip is doing what it is supposed to do. Maybe it's a with logic chip, maybe it's a memory chip, we don't know, right? And they will test on the function. Then you carry out burn-in tests. KESM is well known for it. There's the largest independent burn-in test company over in Malaysia. And maybe even system level testing, which tests the function of our integrity of the chip in an actual environment. So they simulate an actual environment to test the chip, system level testing. So in short, the semiconductor region, it can be segmented into front end and as you can see here, our government is quite keen to invest further into front end, which we're going to talk about it later on also, right? And it segregate into back end. So how do we segregate the both? Basically, until the stage from design to completion of the bare chip, I would say that there is the range of the front end. And from the start of packaging and testing level, is the start of the back end. So this is the difference between front end and back end. So if you look at the companies that are in the front end, typically they would enjoy a better margin, okay, because it's much harder to do. So, and much harder to do. One of the thing, just for context, they would require much more technical and also environment control in a clean room. So if you haven't go into a clean room before, basically it's like you're going to a lab. You have to wear everything. You have to sterilize yourself. Just to give you a context, a human hair, our hair, if you're normal, your human hair is typically anywhere around 50 to 70 micron. And the particles in clean room is less than 1 micron. And a ISO class 1 clean room is normally used for the front end. They allow no more than 10 particles that are less than 1 micron in the room. So imagine the level of cleanliness that you need to manufacture the chip, the product in that room, and how stringent all these requirements are, right? It doesn't mean that our government, is just sitting there. And previously, if you look at the semiconductor companies in Malaysia, semiconductor is known to be dominant over in Penang. But in April 2024, Malaysia actually we don't have it yet. We plan to have a largest integrated circuit design park, which is the chip IC design park over in the C region. So this initiative, we actually also attracted a lot of very good companies. We have SoftBank, which is ARM, Phison. Phison, if you haven't heard of it, it's actually a company founded by I forgot it's called the king of USB or the father of USB, right? And also Skychip. If you are in the industry, then you saw the newspaper, you probably see Skychip name pops up a lot. So there are rumors that this company is not listed yet. There are rumors that this company is planning for listing. They are doing something quite similar to Opstar, right? IC design level. But Opstar, actually, they are quite into post silicon validation. We're going to talk about what they do later on. And this integrated circuit design park actually also attracted some other players like the Shenzhen Semiconductor Industry Association. So if our government is able to make this a successful case, then we will see Malaysia, we have a significant transformation from a typical, Malaysia, people always know us as a OSA player or high mix equipment maker, or maybe precision engineering. We're going to move into a front end player. So far, this has been launched in, as I mentioned, April 2024. Apart from one of the significant investment by our government, in collaboration with ARM. I'm going to explain what ARM do later on. Apart from that, we don't hear a lot from it yet, but I think it's still interesting that our government is launching this kind of initiative, right? But we do not know what is going on after this with, Liberation Day, all this tariff and whatnot. And then ultimately, zooming back into Bursa Malaysia itself, we have a total of approximately 120 companies that are listed under the tag of technology. But based on my filter, I think only 76 companies are profitable, at least for one financial year. So as there are hundreds of them, so during the Q&A session later on, if you have any questions later, please forgive me if I do not know what some of the companies they do. But if I have the knowledge on the company, I'm more than happy to discuss with everyone here. Okay, we're gonna go into semiconductor value chain, something that you probably is more interested in. Okay, so this over here a bit slightly blurry. I'm sorry for that. But this is a global semiconductor value chain chart, right? As you can see, this is created by Quarter. I think this is super useful for a lot of investors to actually understand how the global semiconductor value chain looks like. So a lot of well-known names here. So some of you here, you are maybe familiar with some of the names, like the design companies, like I mentioned, keep mentioning ARM, by SoftBank, and another British-based company founded in British, if I'm not mistaken, Imagination. So you can imagine ARM, they are like a architect, right? They provide their blueprint. ARM, they will provide what they are called so-called ARM infrastructure to other players, maybe like Apple, Qualcomm, MediaTek, Samsung, to license their instruction set. So there are two models that ARM they earn their profit. Number one is that they give you the infrastructure, which is quite common. They license it. And the second one is more custom, their instruction set. They call it instruction set is another jargon, right? So these companies like Apple, they would take their base ARM infrastructure, then they customize it for their own products. For example, M1 and S17 series, I think is also powered by ARM infrastructure after they design it, right? If you look at the prospectus of ARM, they claim that they command 90% market share in terms of mobile device chip infrastructure. So if you are dialing in today with your phone, then it's highly likely that your phone is powered by ARM's infrastructure as well. And then for desktop, laptop, and even for server, ARM is actually going into server as well. I think x86, another infrastructure set, is more dominant in terms of their high performance um, functionality. Intel and AMD, where they have Intel and AMD, they have a close relationship for that. So it's more towards the functionality, stronger power for x86, where ARM, as you can see over on the phone, what's more important is also on the power efficiency, because our phone only have such a small size that we need to put in on our hand. So size is important because we do not have unlimited power supply for that, right? And of course, we look into the next part. It's quite costly. Imagine you are architect. You have to draw a design again and again. Let's say my boss today give me another. I want this functionality based on the infrastructure. I have to draw maybe a new circuit again. It will be super time consuming and super hard to track the whole circuit. Is actually super complex, right? And they would be supported by companies like over here, you can see Cadence and also Synopsys. These two companies, they provide what we call electronic design automation, EDA software, and they will assist all these engineers in terms of design, in terms of testing. We call it pre-silicon validation, which means during that stage, after they draw the design, the circuit of a particular chip, they would carry out a testing maybe with this EDA software. Okay, so moving on in the next part, there are a lot of steps in terms of the wafer manufacturing. So the bare chip that I mentioned just now, like etching, like the lithography, but as a non-tech guy, I try not to confuse you guys. But most importantly, some of the companies that I think you guys must know is SML. SML, I think most of you here may have heard before. And if basically to put into perspective, if you are a chip manufacturing company, a foundry, you are trying to do a chip that are below 7 nanometer without their machine, then good luck. It's basically without their EUV extreme ultraviolet equipment, is super hard to do chips. Right? Canon, if I remember correctly, they are also trying to compete in the 7 nanometer region, but as their products are not proven yet, and foundries, as I mentioned just now, I keep mentioning you. This U is not like dividend, but the success rate after, let's say, you slice a piece of wafer into, let's say, 100 small boxes. How many percent of it can actually turns out successfully into a piece of chip, right? Let's say 98% is super good. Then that is the U that we are keep talking on. So let's say we mentioned clean room just now. Imagine a small piece of dust falls onto one of the boxes, then the whole chip is gone. So it's very stringent on that, right? But in order to draw the circuit onto all these very small and very particular boxes, right? Basically, you would need technology like EUV and DUV, deep ultraviolet or extreme ultraviolet. And for SML, why I keep mentioning it, it's because their equipment, it could cost over hundreds of $1 million. So one equipment, which is a lower end range product, the low NA UV system, uh, Twin Scan, I think is 3400C or something, the model name. It costs around 183 million US dollar. And then the number of parts that you need to fabricate one ASML lithography equipment, it costs over 100,000 parts. And So you can imagine just to carve the design that all these company have done into a piece of wafer, it will be super, super hard, right? A lot of steps, a lot of equipment that you have to actually go through. And over here, you can also see that we have applied material, Lam Research. They are known for the step of helping in terms of depositing, in terms of etching. So before you draw the circuit onto the so-called wafer, you actually need to deposit and etch the chemical for a few times before that. Then we have name like Hitachi, I think quite well known for inspection, metrology, ASM also for deposition, KLA inspection tool as well, right? Someone asked about the next, don't worry. The next is in Malaysia. These are more global in terms of size and everything. Okay. And actually in the next slide, probably I'm gonna talk about the next as well. Okay. Then moving on, we in terms of raw material over on the right of the screen, Shin-Etsu, where they produce silicon wafer photoresist, which are also product used in the lithography. Again, the drawing part onto the wafer. Some they also provide silicon wafer. Then the rest, to be honest with you, I'm not too familiar. Moving on to that, then we have fabless design. What does fabless design mean? That means that they design, but they do not have the fab or the factory to manufacture it. So all these names over here, you see Broadcom, Nvidia, Apple, Qualcomm. It's not, imagine why, you might ask why some companies, you see IDM at the bottom part, right? Why Samsung, why Intel, why Micron, all these company or Infineon, they would do IDM. I design and also I would manufacture it myself. Wouldn't it be more cost efficient if everything is in-house? And in terms of trade secret, isn't it more secure? So imagine if you are running on the forefront, very forefront of a technology. Can you allocate your resources effectively? On one side, you want to design a more power efficient or able to design a stronger chip on one end, right? How much will you need to spend in terms of R&D, getting the talent to keep testing on the EDA, whether this design works or not? How do I continuously minimize the size of the chip so that I can put more chips into one single device with a fixed size, right? On the other hand, as I mentioned just now, you have this one big, imagine a piece of cake with 100 slices. On the other hand, how do I effectively manufacture what the design house has passed to me? It's not that after they pass it to me, they also give me the steps to manufacture it, right? And to maintain the yield, the success rate is very critical. So you can see here, different companies, some they are focusing on design, some they are focusing their resources into foundries, and some that they would prefer them to take on both. Uh, Intel is one of the cases that I think they have difficulties to advance beyond 7 nanometer for many years because their resources, you cannot allocate resources effectively. But it doesn't mean that it will stuck there forever, right? There are still benefits. So it depends on what kind of business model that you are actually looking into, right? And we talk about fabless. Now we talk about foundries. Foundries are the companies that actually go and manufacture. You have TSMC, Global Foundries. We talk about that just now. Spin-off from AMD. We have Taiwan, UMC. I think they are quite known for mature process node. What are process? I mean, mature process node. We always heard how many nanometer, 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer. Well, mature nodes or mature process nodes, actually it ranges from 65 nanometer onwards. And usually the end application is for radio frequency, maybe in some of more common electronic items. And then 28 nanometer to 45 nanometer is probably more advanced mature for automotive, for networking use, which means communicating with other machines, for 5G, and maybe for industrial use for all this equipment, right? And 16 nanometer and below, they are more advanced. And as some of you has already asked, Silterra, Silterra by acquired by Dagang Exchange, DNEX, they are mainly known for their CMOS technology, right? What they are doing or their capability is that they usually use 8-inch or 200 wafer manufacturing, the wafer for manufacturing, and their end product is usually used for complex signal, which means the radio frequency or high voltage RF chips, right? I think they are working towards 65 nanometer chips and below currently. I think they can process around 30,000 wafers to 46,000 wafer per month, depending on their orders and also their capabilities and also what kind of chip that their customer need, right? So that is the Silterra for our Malaysia. And then over in OSAT assembly, testing, and packaging. Malaysia is well known for OSAT. We have Inari, Unisem, MPI, and actually Taiwan is also quite strong in terms of OSAT. They players like ASE Technology, SPIL, KYC doing testing services, and ChipMOS. One of the company in Malaysia, I think they're working with ChipMOS. And over here on the slide, you can see Avantas, Teradyne. They are more known for the equipment part. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Avantas and Teradyne is more to tester for chip testing. Yep, that's the value chain for the global side, right? And next, looking back into Malaysia, our local value chain. Okay, why do I keep talk about the global side first is to give you a perspective of how the semiconductor industry actually looks like on a global scale, right? It's very important to understand that. Then looking back into Malaysia, at least we have a perspective on which part of value chain we are strong on and what we are doing. So first of all, of course, we have Infinix System, Opstar, which is on the IC design, as I mentioned many times. So Opstar is basically on the very front part of the whole manufacturing process of a piece of semiconductor. They're on the architecture, they do consultation, they do design, they also do post-silicon validation services, which is to test after the prototyping part, right? Their testing level for the chips is quite advanced. 28 nanometer process node we just mentioned, 28 nanometer to down to 3 nanometer. So the industry that they serve includes AI, telecommunication, automotive, and more. And if I remember correctly, in 2024, they also collaborated with Samsung Electronics for industrial grade IC and for 14 nanometer FinFET chips. Basically, it's something more to save space, right? So they need to develop something. So architecture is like the chip, they have a fin on top. So we call it FinFET, right? And over here, you can see Silterra. We mentioned about Silterra just now and their manufacturing capabilities. I'm sure they're doing much well than last time, given the capital investment that they got after being acquired by DNEX, right? And all these OSAT player, we mentioned about Inari, MPI, Unisem. Globtronics, I don't have a lot of comment. They are also OSAT and they are specialized in LED sensor product. But if you look at the recent financial performance of this company and their recent cash flow, I think I leave that part for you all to go and explore, right? KSM, as I mentioned just now, they're the largest independent burn-in test player in Malaysia. But in terms of profitability, I think they have some issues with the depreciation. It's a very lean in terms of numbers kind of company, right? Their holding company is actually in Singapore. It's called Sunright, if I remember correctly. So yeah, KSM is also doing the burn-in test. It's quite important for the semiconductor industry. Then we also have JF Tech. JF Tech is one of the industrial favorite stock back in post-COVID era, with the valuation can go up to 200 times during their peak. So what do? Is basically they do the test socket. Basically, the test socket is one of the items. Imagine the machine, testing machine, right? So you still need to put something on it, which is the test socket, right? Interchangeable. Why they don't directly install on it? Because it's changeable. They need to put test socket, pogo pin, or some kind of pins to test the integrity, maybe the flow of electricity, whether it works or not. the functionality. So they're doing this test socket specifically in for 5G for automotive industry. They own a lot of patents. They also sell pogo pins as a complementary product. And same goes for FilePack. They are also selling this test socket, pogo pin. They also manufacture lead frame. I think it's one of the company that they acquire. FilePack actually acquired quite a number of companies. Then we have some more familiar names, the EMS part. We have VS Industry, a lot of retail favorite, SKP Resources, ATA IMS, which is a disaster back in 2021/2022 due to some labor issue, right? So what does EMS actually do? Basically, electronic manufacturing services for long, it can go quite deep from assembly work. Basically, last time people know EMS, or maybe you assemble a hairdryer for some of the companies, well-known companies. But for more advanced EMS player, they don't only do assembly work, which is lower in terms of value and margin. They also do mounting, SMT, right? Surface mounting kind of work. So what does surface mounting means? Imagine you got all these small chips that you need to mount on top of one piece of PCB, printed circuit board. I'm not sure if you guys have opened up a piece of electronic device before, maybe your remote control, maybe your whatever electronic device, they will see a piece of green color. Usually it's green color, huh? Green color board inside with all this circuit. That is what we call PCB, printed circuit board. So they would mount all this chip on it, right? And then to move on next into the assembly work to finish up the product. Or maybe some of the companies, they are involved in deeper in the value chain. They have their own equipment to do the plastic injection molding. Basically, the exterior of the product is also done by them. For example, like PIE, I think they also have the plastic injection molding line over in Penang, right? They are also involved, some of this EMS company, to achieve a higher margin level, they would also get involved in terms of the designing stage, which your guys, what does it mean is that the whole manufacturing process you already designed, so there are no choice for your client but to stick with you in terms of to reach a very optimal kind of design level. I mean, you design the whole process and product, maybe not product, but the process for the EMS, right? Or you core involved in the design. So if a EMS company player is able to involve in that, then they're on, I mean, it's better proposition in the EMS, which is typically perceived as the lower end of the whole value chain, right? And then we have Vitrox, Master, Grid Tech, which assemble the whole line as well. Meet Innovation, Amilus, all these are what we call automated test equipment, ATE players. And Vitrox, basically, they are more known for advanced vision inspection. So we talk about a piece of chip right now, just now, right? After testing, let's say there's an encapsulation on top. So how are you going to test after you cover it up that the chip is still working? So, and there's no crack when you're doing the packaging. So they would have LI, AXI, which are a laser, which they can go through, and they would uh, vision inspect the product. Is something more advanced. Panda Master, they are stronger in terms of automation, smart automation test system, and also on the automotive industry. Emulous, I think in terms of profitability, have some issues, but they are well known for RF radio frequency equipments for quite some time. We also have Meet Innovation. They are in more advanced packaging and test equipment, right? Again, packaging and test. Some of the testing equipment, maybe they include also die attach and other functionality, where the company back in 2018 or 2019, they also acquire a Taiwan-based company that is mainly doing solder ball. So when we talk about putting a piece of encapsulation on top of the bare chip and below there's a substrate, right? You need to cover the chip. So how do you make sure that after you cover it up, it doesn't fall off? It's very simple. You need solder, which to join the two pieces together, which is soldering in the terms. right? And this is what from the edge, the Silicon Malaysia. So you can see the value chain of the whole Malaysia, the including MNC, and what are the local players here. Okay, I didn't really talk about precision engineering. Should we categorize precision engineering as technology? I think some of the company, if they are involved in deeper range in terms of the uh, precision engineering. So let me explain first. Precision engineering is basically either they take a block metal, a piece of metal, and go through a couple of steps, the machines to come up with an end product, right? Some of the end products they would use on, imagine to assemble a test equipment. So you need all these metal parts, right? So precision engineering, some of them they would serve this industry. They would manufacture all these testers, parts of the tester. So would you categorize as technology? I think some of it, if they are directly into this equipment, probably yes. And if you do not think so, then precision engineering is not one of the thing to consider. But a lot of precision engineering player over in Malaysia, actually they are serving semiconductor players and also E&E players. So when the E&E player or semiconductor player, let's say they're doing well, in a sense, they are also benefited. So whether you want to put them in a value chain or not, like UWC, SFP Tech, Coraza, and I think we have a couple more players. So whether you want to put them into value chain, it's really up to you. And probably, I don't know yet, but some of you might ask about DNO in the chat box. Basically, what they do is they are into the advanced LED. If you are drawing BBA, which is BMW, Benz and or Audi, so you see all these fancy light function last time. I think in COVID Vera, they're doing super well, right? Post-COVID, everyone want to buy new car. And then it's the launch of EV, a lot of new model being launched at the time. DNO, LED function is something fancy. So there's a lot of demand for that. They also have a huge exposure over into the China market. A lot of China players that are using their product as well for DNO, but I think they are recently is not doing so well. Basically, with the slowdown in terms of the semiconductor industry, sorry, automotive or EV industry, basically a bit of slowdown, right? So the chart itself is not holistic. As I mentioned, we have 120 companies over in Bursa, Malaysia. So it's almost impossible to fit any companies over, all the companies over in this chart, but it's to give you a perspective. For example, like precision engineering companies, and one of the friends here also asked about Franken, right? Franken, I think, is a long-time favorite for a lot of value investor. What do they do is basically precision cleaning. They have some facilities over in Taiwan, and I think they're doing quite well recently as well. If you look at their results, it's actually dragged by weaker Taiwan dollar, and also has been dragged by their oil and gas division. But it's something called precision cleaning. It's something more interesting out of this chart over here. Okay. And over here, we have the Malaysia. We are trying to invest hugely into the front end part. Malaysia, we have committed to invest 250 million US dollar. With our current rate now is probably around 1.1 billion ringgit plus minus 1.2. What I do with this money is to buy some of this chip design and also the technology from ARM for our local companies or local players. And as we mentioned previously, oh sorry, not mentioned previously. Previously, our Malaysia, we launched something called Malaysia National Semiconductor Strategy, NSS. Our government actually committed to support and train up to 60,000 engineers to transform the country into a front-end semiconductor-based country. So if you look at our neighbor, right, Singapore is actually, to a lot of surprise, including myself, and I just got to know it, they are quite strong in the front-end semiconductor, just our neighbor. So one issue with Malaysia in terms of retaining the talent over for the front end is always the current exchange issue. But with the NSS and also government initiative, I think they are willing to provide more funding to support, to support the locals, the Malaysian to stay in Malaysia, but to pursue their interests continuously in the industry, right? And why is this so important? They are moving into the front end is because back-end semiconductor, as the technology getting more mature, I think this is something that over the long term, people need to move into the front part because the design part is the critical. And although the back end part, as I mentioned just now, is also mission critical to come up with the end chip, but it could be challenged and it could be, not to say replaced, right, by other regions like India. Actually, if you see their technology side is actually building up too. Um, Front end, I think in terms of if you talk about the service that they're providing, I think you can categorize them on a front end because they are mainly serving front end semiconductor player. It's a servicing company. It's something more, more interesting, something more niche. I think we have only one specific company that doing precision cleaning over in Malaysia, and that's front end. Yep. Okay. And I think this is a very brief chart, right? It's probably not updated because I've done this slide a couple of days ago, right? So as you can see here, our Malaysia Technology Index year-to-date basis has actually been dropping, but recently, I think over these few days, actually rebounded even stronger, probably, right? And also, I would like to take this opportunity to talk about the overall technology index. And if you look at the Bursa Malaysia Technology Index, they track 49 stocks, right? Has already dropped by 31, overall 30 something percent and then rebounded. But the PE valuation for the sector itself is actually not cheap, 34, 35 times, if I'm not mistaken. And I think 2018, 2019 times is around, if you read the H news, right, it's around 30 times. Long-term median is 28.68 times. So it's slightly above what they're trading historically. So, and this is to compare the performance between Malaysia, Hang Seng Tech, and also Nasdaq, right? So what I want to highlight here is that our Malaysia technology stock, the PE relatively is not that cheap. It's what we call a lot of forecasts or a lot of forward-looking kind of sentiment has been factored into the sector itself. Normally, when we use PEG, let's say a PEG of 1, but you are having a PE ratio of, let's say, 30, 35 times, right? I would expect the company to grow at a 30% to 35% rate, CAGR, or let's say annual growth for the next year. I would expect you grow 30 or 35%. And if you look at some of the companies back over in Malaysia, listed in Malaysia, to deliver 30%, 35% year-on-year growth is quite difficult. So if you are really bullish on one company, one particular company like Franken, because of the latest quarter that sort of dragged their financial performance, the PE actually elevated to 42.68 times. But I think it's still a darling for a lot of analysts and some of the investors here, right? But again, you cannot deny that a lot of forward-looking sentiment has already been priced into the stock. So when you are buying this technology company, you need to ask yourself what kind of upside and what kind of downside risk am I going to see in terms of when we factor with PE or PEG. So really need to ask yourself. Then in terms of regional, okay, when you're comparing regional, it's even more so. So you really need, this is one of the things that I would like to highlight. And for KGB, thank you for raising it up. KGB, if you look at their categorization, they are actually under main market industrial engineering. They are doing sort of construction and also something very niche, which is the installation of ultra high purity gas, specifically for this front-end semiconductor company. Some of the names that they serve, I think, SMIC, which is the China largest what we call China largest chip fabricator, SMIC, one of their clients. And recently and last year, they are also securing a lot of contract, right? And fund flow wise, I think EPF is also buying them quite aggressively. And if you look at the order book, it's huge. So if you're a KGB holder from last time until now, I think you are laughing very um, happily. Okay. But fundamentally, it's also interesting to talk about whether KGB is a construction company, because what they do is construction, right? And also installation. They're also in engineering part, which is for the ultra high purity gas, right? Their specialty. Uh, I don't think you should categorize this kind of company as a construction company. Basically, what they do is number one, it's very niche. It's not another construction company that can do the same work, not neither they can tender for the same work. Maybe for the infrastructure and maybe for the general construction work, yes. But in terms of the technology part, when the semiconductor player they want to build the factory, the front end plant, you need someone like KGB to build the well, because I mentioned just now, semiconductor front end part, you're probably gonna use a lot of chemical. One of it are those gases, right? So KGB is in that range. Okay, so I think it's something interesting to talk about because they are in the industrial engineering part. Okay. Okay, I think we also briefly talk about the valuation example, right? About PE and PEG. Maybe I'm gonna move into the Q&A part because I would believe that you guys would also throw me a lot of things to ask, especially some company names like MMSV. Just a disclaimer, if I know about a company, I'm more than happy to share, but I honestly I do not know every single technology company in Malaysia. Nor that I have the latest update for them. But if I know, I'm happy to share.
All right. Thanks, Max, for dissecting the global value chain of semiconductor. So I guess all of us here are now more familiar with the role of the companies that you mentioned, what role they play in the semiconductor value chain. So if any question to ask our speaker today, please write your question in the Q&A box, not the chat box, so we can facilitate the Q&A more efficiently. Now, the first question on my panel is how is the development on IC design park at PFCC recently? Is the current progress appealing? So this is from ST Lee.
Hmm. Okay, as I mentioned just now, I think the PFCC we do not have a lot of updates. I would consider the recent um our government signing with ARM for the 250 million US dollar. That would be one of the development that our government is committing more money into this. So they will buy the technology, the infrastructure I explained earlier on to support our local engineers to venture into the front end, which is on the chip design level. Probably they will work with one of the companies that are in the PFCC is the Skychip, right? Which to my surprise is not other names but Skychip. So that would be considered one of the key development of this part. Okay, beyond Penang. A lot of people are quite surprised that the park IC design park is beyond Penang, which has already have a very matured kind of ecosystem there. Because when we talk about building a company or building something, a park, you need to consider also the nearby value chain. For example, if I want to build a foundry, then I need to consider how far away am I from my raw material supplier or from my equipment supplier in the event. Uh, we talk about productivity at the very beginning. If in the event that something broke down, right, how quick can I get all this support? So a lot of people are quite surprised with that. But I guess designing is something special, so we're gonna continue look on to that.
All right. So following up on ARM, right? So Faisal, Ahmad would like to ask, what are the companies related to ARMS Holdings?
Mm, let me let me think about it, and I come back to this question later on. If you talk about direct exposure into ARM, because you have to think about that because they are directly involved in the infrastructure, which are the architect, the blueprint part. So for Malaysia companies to get directly involved with ARM, I think is quite hard. Yeah, so let me think about it if I can come up with any names that I know.
All right.
Listed.
All right. Thanks, Max. The next question is by BJ Heng. He would like to ask about this company called MPI, right? Malaysian Pacific Industries, which is
Mm.
a OSAT player. All right. So, what is your take on this company's performance and future direction?
Okay. Maybe can I combine this question with one of the question with tariff? I think it's quite relevant together. So if
Sure.
you look back onto 2018 and 2019, this is basically the trade war 2.0 imposed by someone here called quite money, the tariff man. It's the second time that this has been imposed, and we initially we have a blanket tariff of 24%. But after that, we have an exemption, especially on the semiconductor industry. But it doesn't stop a uh something what we call the short-term influx of order for a lot of companies, right? And I think over the short term, according to one of the analyst report, not directly from me, they would mention that um they could be benefited from this over the shorter term. But don't forget that uh, custom MPI, basically they would also have the exposure onto the China plus one strategy. As I mentioned just now, not only US, they want to move everything back to US, but China to prevent that they are being kept away from more advanced kind of strategy, more advanced kind of developments. They have their own China plus one, which they are importing a lot of technology and everything, right? If you look at their headcount, I think they are increasing their headcount quite aggressively, 7.2 thousand people that are working for the company, and they also have a lot of capex recently. Okay, so MPI exposure is 20%. With the tariff, I think not very, very big impact over the shorter term. But I think the company itself is quite solid with their exposure over in the China. Yeah. But for the exact target price, I think I would refer you to some of the analyst report.
All right. So you've talked about the exemptions of tariff for semiconductor. So, what about the impact to the E&E?
Mm. I think the E&E sector is quite similar. With semiconductor, there is an exemption and then there's a waiver of 90 days. Then that depends on what kind of E&E you're asking. If you're asking about E&E sector, specifically EMS, for one of the companies that are doing the EMS job for NVIDIA, sorry, a bit too bright red for my face, doing the EMS services for NVIDIA, then the company claims that there are no such issue that they're doing transshipment. So what does transshipment means that they come to Malaysia, right? And then they go back to US, or the exportation is going into some places that are not being permitted after the Biden's strategy administration, right? So about the E&E industry, I think over the short term, based on channel check, there is some surges in terms of order over the short term. But if you look back to 2018/2019, when the first tariff comes on, after this period, it probably will slow down for some time until all of them they are familiar with it or they have some further clarity. Then I would like to elaborate further in terms of this. I think in past couple webinars with Shane, I also mentioned about this. Now, if you want to manufacture a piece of equipment or a piece of precision metal that has been completed, you have to go through, let's say if I send this product to US, they will ask you where are your raw materials coming from, what kind of machine do you use, where is it coming from? More so if you're doing equipment assembly part. Let's say you assemble a full testing equipment and then you send it off, let's say to US, you send it to China more so. So when you buy some of the parts, as I mentioned just now, for example, metrology parts, inspection parts, because you also buy to manufacture, it's not everything from ground. When you're buying all these parts and to assemble the complete machine, your vendor, especially from China, they will start to ask you, what is this for? And where are you exporting this product to? And show me your proof that this is over to this country. So the whole value chain is getting more and more stringent in terms of this issue. So you need to look into the companies itself. whether they have exposure into US, whether they have exposure into China, or they have exposure into both. If they have exposure into both and it's quite balanced, then I think it will be a bit awkward for the propositioning of the company. So you have to look into the revenue contribution in terms of the regional basis.
All right. Thanks, Max. So, in your opinion, what are the upside potentials and the downside risks of semiconductor players in Malaysia right now?
I think upside definitely is what we mentioned just now. Number one is the trade diversion order flowing more orders over into Malaysia. I think that's one of the key upside potential. And second part is the success in penetrating into front-end semiconductor that would be more impactful and meaningful over into the whole Malaysia. If you look at the past, maybe in the 10 years, right, you do not really see a very stellar or very mega size kind of semiconductor or technology player just founded and just grow into a unicorn. You don't really see uh, that much anymore. So some of the companies they might move into other regions, right? And data center. Last time we had discussed about data center. Uh, Now with the restriction in terms of exportation into data center on the ground, based on what I know, China side they are still very aggressive in Malaysia in terms of securing land bank and building data center. China is very aggressive on this. But for US side, it's probably a bit slow now. Everyone is deferring order or they are watching. And the potential downside risk is that Malaysia, we are being categorized as, whether we are sided on China or sided on US. If we were to have a huge conflict onto one of them, then these companies might be getting impacted quite badly. I think so far no issues based on our ties over with China, but um, if something happens that exacerbate our relationship with making it worse for us and US side, although China is one of our largest trading partner now, I think that would really impact our semiconductor side. And don't forget, as I mentioned just now, although we are doing OSAT and ATE, right? A lot of these parts, this equipment, all this raw material we are importing. Um, so there is also a risk that if we got any kind of I don't think it will happen, but if it's any potential sanction, and that would be a key risk. And also, of course, forex currency risk. Yeah, that's the up and downside that I can figure of.
All right. Just now you mentioned about the national in semiconductor strategy, which
Mm.
our prime minister has announced not too long ago. So the question here from Lee is, does it have a direct impact with the downstream players here?
Downstream player. Okay, I'm not
Mm.
sure if you're referring downstream player onto the back-end semiconductor side, but basically they are also they and in the NSS actually they're also talking about to enhance our OSAT players, right? And also expanding our local fabrication plant and of course the front end part. And when we talk about OSAT, it's not packaging. We talk about packaging. Last time only typical packaging. Now we got 2.5D packaging, 3D packaging, and whatnot, all these things. So actually, Malaysia OSATs, we are already improving in this part. We are already importing or they are self-developing new technology to do all these things, right? And the NSS part, if you look at it, one of the key target is to attract up to 500 billion in terms of domestic and foreign investment. And I think they are targeting to develop 10 Malaysian companies that are in design or advanced packaging. Again, the keyword is advanced packaging, right? They are targeting to have 10 Malaysian companies that they going to what we call empower to push them further, right? And one important thing is to grow the engineer for 60,000. 60,000 engineer, if you times their salary, let's say taking a median of 8,000, the number per month is quite huge, right? The NSS. The number is quite huge in terms of the monthly payroll, uh, let alone yearly. So for the government to have NSS to support the training of all these engineers, I think in terms of talent, they are solving quite a number of problems. I think the NSS, apart from we talk about the 10 Malaysian companies, they are actually empowering these companies that with a revenue of already they have a billion in terms of revenue, but they're also pushing to grow 100 smaller technology firm in the sector to push them in future to go 1 billion. And wafer fab park, they're also planning to do wafer fab park. Talent development, very important. And they are also going to support, this one is front end, the chip design part. Yeah, so if you're talking about purely back end, they are supporting the OSAT, especially on the advanced packaging part also.
All right. Thanks, Max. The next question is, what are the companies that are involved in AI related business? So this is asked by Samuel.
Okay, I will give you, I do not have all the names, but I can give you a hint to look into their client, right? I give you an example, whether you see this is AI or not. Inari. Inari, their client, if you look at their client is the key or main supporter for iPhone in terms of the RF chips. And whether you see this, they are exposed in the AI because Apple, if you have the Apple phone, you have all this new iOS, right? Whether that is AI or not, I'll leave it up to you. But I think a lot of things as fundamentally is data or what related, right? Is still AI related. And you see whether their client they're doing something on that or not. What are their end applicant? If something is related with AI, then yes, definitely they're involved in AI. But if you want direct exposure, like one of the company with NVIDIA, right? And there are actually a couple more companies that they're claiming they are directly involved in AI. So you really have to gauge, number one, what is the end applicant? Who are their customers? These are the two very important things that you need to look at, right? So you can have a look. I think some of the big names and some ATE player, direct or indirect, their client is also involved in AI. Let's say, for example, one of the ATE player, if they supply 10 machines over to their customers who are involved in the testing process for AI chips. So are they directly involved in AI? Probably no, but at least it's a growing industry that their client, right? Not end user, but their client, there's a potential to order more and more from there. So we really need to go deeper into this.
Yeah, I think another example would be from EMS player like Nation Gate, right?
Yeah, that
The
one is
direct proxy to NVIDIA.
direct exposure.
Mm. So the next question by Kennedy is that, what role does NIMP, right, the new Industrial Master Plan 2030, play in driving Malaysia's semiconductor industry? Are there any companies that would directly benefit from this initiative?
Hmm, NIMP. I don't really remember all the initiative over in the NIMP 2030, but I think NIMP is more toward manufacturing, if I'm not mistaken. So you really need to look into the smart manufacturing part of it, right? Smart manufacturing, automation, and they also talk about net zero, but I'm not sure if Malaysia companies, of course, every company is doing what they can in terms of net zero, but directly, let's say doing a machine, doing a part for net zero related, I don't think that's a lot of that. But they're also talking about E&E, talking about IC design. I think one industry they're also talking about advanced materials, which advanced materials and EV. EV is one of the things that we are pushing, but um, if you look at the TIV in Malaysia, actually EV is doing quite well, right? Total industrial value for Malaysia. In terms of EV, we are still growing, but unfortunately, mostly are foreign brands. It is not really local brands yet. I think Proton is EMAS 4 is also doing quite well. And NIMP specifically, I think aerospace is also one of them. But to end applicant, so far if I was going through some of the quarterly report, I so far didn't see any direct from there lah. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Max. Um, are there still any impact on the DeepSeek in this technology sector?
Okay, DeepSeek, I think it actually scares away. Let's talk about DeepSeek. Last time, it scares away a lot of investor in the sense that whether do we really need so much computing power? Remember when DeepSeek just launched and people are questioning OpenAI and also NVIDIA, do we really need so much computing power when they can do so low? I'm sorry, do so much with such a low budget, 5.6 million US dollar, if I remember correctly, to train their DeepSeek V3 model, V2 or V3 model, right? But you have to remember, number one, as I mentioned just now, fundamental is data. Number one, where does DeepSeek get their data? Is it the same data crawling and data lake like what OpenAI has does? Or they're using data distillation method where they have a reliable model that they train is not from 5.6 million for sure, right? Do they have another model that's supporting this V3 model? It's like ChatGPT, if the most advanced one, I think is 4.5 or 4.0, right? But before all this, they also have ChatGPT. We struggle with ChatGPT 3. 4 is okay. 3 is a bit not there, but 4.0, 4.5, yes, it's quite very, very useful. So the implication of do we really need so much computing power? I think that has already ended so far, but it doesn't stop that DeepSeek come out with another um news that they have a breakthrough in terms of their technology, right? That would probably again impact some of the GPU player, or maybe I didn't mention about SK Hynix. They were also supplying to NVIDIA in terms of high bandwidth memory. Is something also needed a lot in the GPU also. So back to your question, so far, is there any huge impact on this? Really not so much, if you ask me.
All right. So the next question by Mahalingam is that is Great Tech considered a technology company, and what is the prospect for the company?
Yeah, Great Tech is definitely one of the technology company. What they do is okay, correct me if I'm wrong or I remember correctly. They are doing test equipment plus the whole line. So let's say if their client come to them, right, is something a bit similar to Great Tech. Great Tech, they have a customer T, a EV player that comes to them, hey, I want to enhance my productivity or the flow of my whole manufacturing process. I want it to be more efficient. Then for Great Tech, I think their exposure into solar. There are only a couple of US solar player, right? And also e-mobility players in US. So you can roughly imagine who lah. So Great Tech, and they are very greatly exposed into the US market. So number one question, are they considered technology company? Yes. And number two, in terms of prospect, I think if we are talking about, okay, we talk about a term called reshoring. Reshoring means that what Trump has been aiming at, moving all the value chain, moving everything back to US. So to move all these things back to US, what do you need? Capital expenditure, CapEx. That means you would maybe need to invest in new lines, new machinery. So if their customers are directly over in US, or they have the exposure over in US, I think Great Tech, following that, they could be benefited, but that also applies to other equipment player that are capex basis, right? So Biden's administration, they have a semiconductor bill that is supporting semiconductor player coming back to have their manufacturing line. But okay, recently we have a news that talk about future of manufacturing is no longer about cheap labor, but it's more about automation. That means that you have a whole lights out manufacturing capacity, then you can manufacture. But that is on mass production. That means the product is going for mass production. Really don't need human intervention. It's already so automated to that stage. But for semiconductor, a lot of times they probably would still need human intervention in the sense that some of the parts of the process, they might not able to automate that, right? That is for the automation part. But Great Tech alone or other companies that are capex based, exposure to US companies, they probably could be benefited from the reshoring, right? So, yep.
Thanks, Max. So the next question is, as of now, are there any listed company that has announced or have shown their interest to participate in this initiative at the PFCC?
Probably they did. I think a lot of companies they probably did express their interest, but again, it's more limited to the front end part. Listed players maybe I don't know. I do not have the evidence, but probably Upstar did talk about it. Yeah.
All right. Um, so Offsite also in IC design, right? So this would be
Yes.
relevant to them. All right. So the next question is, do you have any idea on the prospect of Adaran since the share price has been coming up?
No. No, I do not know this company.
All right. So I think recently there was a visit by AMD to Malaysia. Are there any companies that are related to this announcement?
Okay. Let me go back. Why is this important? Okay, usually, right, when we talk about a certain player, they coming over into Malaysia or they building like ATNS, I think recently they have some developments also. Let's say MD they coming into Malaysia, then you can explore the chart specifically and you look at the value chain. Then you try to figure out whether what are things that MD is coming over to Malaysia. Are they going to, set up a facility over here? Are they going to expand over here, or what are the things that they are trying to do over here? And look around the nearest, let's say in Kulim High Tech Park, then you already have some of the players over there, right? QES, they also have a small office over there. Let's say they are in Kulim High Tech Park, then maybe in Perak, Unisem, Kasem, and then more commonly known, we have the Penang side. You have all these companies. So I presumably the visit, maybe in Penang. Then you look around for the value chain over there, right?
Right. So looks like we have the time is up for us to do Q&A anymore. So thank you to Max for answering all our questions. All right.
Thank you so much, Shane, and thank you everyone for listening in.
Okay, let me take over my slide. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, you just listened to the founder of 12 Invest, okay, Mr. Max Tan.